Hi, welcome to Fiberchats. My name is Irina. I'm the host here. My guest today is Taylor Bento. Hi, Taylor.
Hi, Arena.
Well, one of your posts that I saw on Instagram gives a warning that following you on Instagram may result in people learning how to crochet.
Yeah.
When you started this, when you decided to turn your hobby into business, what was your goal for Instagram? What were you trying to achieve? Like, do you have a
Yeah.
vision?
Yeah. So before I launched into my own business, I was a marketing professional. And so I really enjoyed doing the marketing, but I had a hard time doing it for other people. I worked for a financial company and I wasn't very passionate about it. And it was really hard to come up with ideas for what to post for a finance company on Instagram. So when I finally started my crochet business, and I love crochet, and I was so excited to talk about it with other people who also love crochet, I really just took it as an opportunity to have fun and meet people. It was during the pandemic, so I wasn't seeing a lot of people at the moment. So it was just a really fun way to talk about something I really love. And I just had a lot of fun with it. And I think people were attracted to that because I'm silly and I post all kinds of like tips, but also like just like funny inside jokes that crocheters would understand. And I just have a good time with all of it. So that's kind of what the vision was, is to create a space for the crochet community to come and just like enjoy being together and talking about something that we all love.
I mean, what caught my attention first was there's like this a little bit of a divide between knitters and crocheters. Like we all understand that we can probably do both, but there are people who like concentrate on one thing or another. And I like that you post techniques for knitters of how to learn crochet. Like this is to me, and it makes sense, right? Because
Yeah.
like depending on what you used to, you might find different techniques more easier for you. So one of the things that you talked about, how like if you could go back, you would try different ways to hold the crochet hook. Why is it
Mhm.
important for people to like try different techniques and find what works best for them?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I was a knitter before I learned crochet. And whenever I picked up the crochet hook, I had a really hard time. I was trying to hold it with a pencil hold, because that's what my great grandmother showed me. And I thought that was the correct way to hold the crochet hook. And it wasn't until I let go of all of my, like, oh, you're supposed to hold it like this. And I was holding it more like a knitting needle
Right.
and holding my yarn with my other hand. So it felt like I was kind of in a similar position. And then it really clicked, and crochet was really fun for me after that. So I think I learned that people just need to play around and have fun with it and not take it so seriously. I've taught some crochet classes in person, and people are like stiff and, like struggling with how to hold everything. And I try to just like lighten the mood and make it fun and say, oh, like it's okay. We can just put the yarn over here and try that, wrap it around your pinky. Maybe that'll work. Like put it over this finger. Just have fun and experiment until it feels right for you. And I see people just like kind of embrace the uncomfortable process of it. And then they get it so much faster because they've tried some different ways and they're not just sitting there struggling like with this one way they think is the right way.
I mean, I also like think it's important for any kind of craft to realize that there's like no right and wrong. There's like different ways to do different techniques even, right? So for some techniques, I prefer using continental. For other techniques, I use both English and continental in my
Yeah.
knitting. And like sometimes I notice like certain technique would hurt my fingers. So I would
Hmm.
switch to another one and it just uses different muscle group and it lets
Yeah.
my hand rest, you know? So it's like the same with crochet. Like you don't necessarily have to do everything one way, you know? There are multiple ways and you can experiment with that.
Yeah, and that's what I love about bringing the fiber arts community together and supporting each other versus seeing each other as competition, because we can have fun trying new things, and it's not a, oh, you're doing that wrong. Like that's not the right way to do things. And people comment those things on my stuff sometimes. And I always like respond with, oh, like find what's right for you, because it should be fun. It should be a positive, encouraging experience to connect with other fiber artists, knitters, crocheters, macrame artists. I honestly, I do them all, and I enjoy talking to people who do them too.
Well, when I first tried crochet, like if I would follow a tutorial or if somebody would show me a stitch, I could immediately do it. Like I don't think that crochet is difficult by any means, right? What trips me over is reading the pattern. Tell
Oh yeah.
me, you teach that. You teach how to read patterns and you teach pattern reading for different levels of crochets.
Mhm.
Tell me like how that started. Like what made you think that you should make video tutorials about that?
Well, I think partially because I did it the hard way. I kind of stumbled through learning pattern reading, and I get a lot of messages and comments asking me, "How did you learn how to read these? These are so complicated. I can't figure it out, and I really want to be able to make more things." So I just share like quick tips on Instagram that can help people pick it up in a little bit of a quicker way than I did, without as much trial and error. But I am working on possibly like a course or something like that that might help people. I know there is one on the American Crochet Association page that teaches you pattern reading, which is very handy. I took some classes eventually, and that's what helped me. But there's a lot of free resources out there on like what the different parentheses and brackets mean. The best thing that I always recommend to people is to follow a pattern that also has a video tutorial. So you can take it line by line, and that'll help you to gain those pattern reading skills. But it's also tricky because every pattern designer writes a little bit differently. There's a lot of different styles. And yeah, if you get to know a pattern designer and you enjoy them, then follow more of their patterns and get comfortable with it before you try another completely different designer with a different writing style. Crochet books too. I love going to the library and getting crochet books because those patterns, the entire book is going to have a similar writing style. So if it makes sense to you, then you can look through all those patterns and find things you like.
Tell me your journey as a designer. Like at what point did you decided to announce to the world that you're a designer? And
Yeah.
what was that learning process, right? Of how you're gonna write those patterns and how you're gonna make those videos and explain it to people so they understand and they follow you.
Yeah, it's so funny because imposter syndrome gets everybody sometime, and it took me a long time to call myself a designer. I started out selling finished crochet bags, and I didn't realize that I was already designing my own stuff because I wasn't following a pattern. I was creating my own original bags. But people kept asking me, "Do you have a pattern for this? Do you have a pattern for this?" I was like, "No, like I hadn't even thought about that. I was just trying to sell bags." So then I started to explore the idea of writing patterns for the designs that I had made and took some classes, learned how to read patterns, doing all those things. And the more that I learned, the more I realized how much I actually enjoy the design process. And I love crocheting too, but I didn't want to create the same things over and over and over again. I like coming up with new ideas. So I started just practicing and trying things out. I kept it really simple at first, doing some coaster patterns, some washcloths, things like that, and kind of stretched my skills and started writing patterns for the bags that I had already created to try to like get those out. But it wasn't until probably last year that I finally was like, okay, I'm a crochet designer. Like I'm not just a crafter. I think a lot of us downplay our skills. Um, and I also finally got to the point where my patterns were selling enough that I could stop selling physical bags and crochet items. So I made that switch totally over to designer and content creator, which was a big deal. It was hard. It was like I don't know, is this how this is going to go? I'm just going to try it. And it's worked out really well for me.
Well, you talked about how like what makes an original design because I see people all the time taking like one pattern, adjusting it a little bit, making a couple changes and calling it their design. Tell me how like your thought process on that.
I I am very creative. I get these crazy ideas, and sometimes I can actually make it happen and sometimes I can't because they're too crazy. But I think it's really important to have your own voice as a crochet designer and your own style, because if somebody were to look at all your patterns, the idea is they would know like, oh yeah, these are bags by Bento. because they have a similar aesthetic and style, and or you have a signature or whatever it is. And I learned that from marketing, that consistency of having a brand, of having a voice, of having a particular style. And I think um, people don't think about that whenever they're designing crochet patterns. They're like, oh, I like this thing someone made, so I'm going to make my own thing, versus finding inspiration within themselves. So I find inspiration in some like pretty funny ways. One day I had mud everywhere all over the front porch, and I'm sweeping and cleaning. I'm like, I really need a mat out here. And so I was like, oh, I have some jute rope. I'm gonna see if I can make a doormat with it. So I made this really cute jute rope doormat, and it worked out great because jute is pretty sturdy and it's still out there. And so I was like, oh, I'm going to write a pattern and a tutorial for this. And that's one of my most popular patterns to date. So it's funny how if you get inspiration from things that you need or nature or whatever it is that makes you really happy, you avoid a lot of the confusion of, am I breaking copyright? Am I copying somebody? Because it's coming from your own vision. And even if it's super simple, that's okay. There might be similar things out there, but it's written in a way that's original to you. And it's, yeah, you can prove that you came up with that on your own.
What's like, is there a design that you created that you didn't expect gonna be performing like so well?
Yeah, my hanging baskets pattern, it's it went viral last year, which I really didn't expect. And those were funny because there are a lot of like hanging tier basket type patterns in the crochet community. So when I made those, I was, I came up with this idea. I wanted to have it for my plants and my crochet supplies and things like that. So I kind of created based on like, aesthetic or like styles that were trending, things like that. And then after I made the pattern, I was like, oh, there's a lot of stuff out there that looks like this. And it worried me. But the more confidence that I gained from like, oh, I came up with this on my own without copying anyone else. I didn't like get this inspiration from anyone. I wrote this pattern from beginning to end without any influence. I just like leaned into it and had fun with it. And they have been really successful, which is wonderful. And I think it's a lot of fun too to think about using alternative materials. I think that's one thing that sets me apart, is that I'm not afraid to try like some weird stuff, like jute rope or cotton macrame cord, or right now I'm working on something with raffia and rope at the same time. And those types of things, even if it's something, a pattern that's really simple that might look similar to others that are out there, if you have your own flair on it, I think that makes a difference.
Well, you went from a corporate job where like you were guaranteed hours, but also guaranteed income, to being on your own. Is that less stress on you or more stress on you?
Both, I think. I have an entrepreneurial type of spirit, I guess. So the adventure fuels me. It makes me really excited. I like having the change, and it also sometimes gets to me, the uncertainty of everything. I have a partner, so I'm lucky in the sense that we do have a full-time income coming in at the same time. But my income like contributes a lot too. So I have to make sure that I'm not just like completely dropping the ball there. Um, and it's tricky too because I have two kids that are not school age yet. So balancing everything is tricky sometimes. But I love every minute of it versus the corporate world when I was stuck in a cubicle and my kids were with child care providers. And I just felt like a lot of my time was being wasted sitting at a desk, not doing anything. I think the pandemic showed people that you can get a lot of work done at home, that you don't need to be in an office constantly. But there are still people out there that are just like having to sit at a desk just to be there because your boss doesn't want you to go home. And I think that's really unfortunate because we are so creative and there are only so many hours in the day. And to not be able to have that flexibility, it just like didn't work for me. Like I needed to have like some like ability to be creative, also do the business stuff, take breaks when I need to. So I really enjoy working for myself.
Well, you mentioned to me that you posting on Instagram twice a day, 7 days a week. Does that ever get to you? Are you ever out of ideas?
Yeah, sure. I think the biggest burnout came this past Christmas season. A lot of people noticed that I wasn't sharing a lot of YouTube videos at the time, and I finally did have to get to a point where I took a break. My family was going through a lot. We had a lot of health things happen around that time, and so yeah, it was a struggle to kind of like keep up with that schedule. So I finally got to the point where I was like, you know what? I need to dial it back a little bit and recognize that I'm in a season of my life where I need to slow down. And so I took that time knowing that it was going to affect my business, it was going to affect my numbers, but that I was going to do that for myself and for my family and then come back strong in January. So I took about 6 weeks just slowing everything down. I was posting 5 times a week instead of twice a day, 7 days a week, and making sure that what I was posting was valuable and was going to be the most bang for my buck, so to speak. So, like quality over quantity. And then in January, I had a lot of ideas for how to like get back in the game, basically. Um, and that was okay. It took me a minute to kind of get back up to where I was, but I was ready for that because I had a lot more energy. So my advice to anyone that starts to feel burnt out or burnout's coming is to slow down, take that time because you can come back even stronger.
Well, when you post, how much of yourself do you put in that post? Is it like purely, do you approach it like as purely like a marketing campaign? You have a product to sell and this is what you're gonna talk about, or do you try to let your audience know about you, your views, your political views, your likes, dislikes, your family? Like how open are you about yourself and your life?
Yeah, that's a great question. I very seldomly have like a here's my product, buy this. That's just not my style of doing social media. I'm a very like personal, get to know you type of person. Like I want to have that connection with people. And I think people recognize that too, because when they come to my page, they don't feel like I'm selling them something. They feel like they know me, like we're friends. And we are. I know a lot of people. I actually like answer all my messages and my comments and stuff. Um, so I do like give a lot of myself on my Instagram. I do have some boundaries around certain things that I keep private. Um, yeah, and those conversations happen between me and my partner and my family. Like, what do we like want to keep private to just us? And because my partner is not a social media person, he's just not into it. And I've like, do you want to be a part of it? Do you want to join in? Like, it's like, nah, not for me. So I'm always respectful of that. And I only share things that he feels comfortable with when he's involved. So I think you have to figure out what works best for you in terms of how private are you? Because if you do open yourself up to certain things, you have to be ready for the response. I had my first ever mega viral post on TikTok and Instagram was I didn't even know controversial, but it ended up being controversial. I said something about I was in Target and they were selling crochet items. And I was like, what? This is so wrong. Like people spent hours making these things and crochet can't be made by machine. So these people were probably underpaid. And it went crazy. Like people had their opinions about it. There's a cult following for Target. I was like, oh gosh. Like, um, but because I had already kind of gotten accustomed to sharing about myself and being okay with people having their opinions, I was able to get through that a lot easier, I think, than some people who maybe would have been like really overwhelmed by the amount of people coming after them. There were some that were really tough. I won't lie. There was some like pretty nasty people, especially on TikTok. Um, and I just would block and move on. So I don't know. It's a lot to navigate, but at the same time, it has been so worth it for me to just come to Instagram authentically and being myself because I don't have to like turn myself on to go and like do my job. It's just a part of who I am and I'm just being myself.
Sometimes when you watch a movie and there is certain character in the movie and you can only picture that person as that character, are you nervous that putting yourself like concentrating on bags only will put you in that box that people expect you to do just that, and it's gonna also limit your artistic ability to do different things?
Yeah, I get that. I think from my marketing background, I learned how important it is to find a specialty and target that first before you branch out. Finding a target or a niche or whatever you want to call it doesn't mean that you can't branch out later. So I went with Bags by Bento because one, I love accessories. I like quick, satisfying crochet projects. I know I will never be a garment designer. That was something that was never like on my radar. I enjoy making my own garments for me and my family, but I don't want to make patterns for them. It's just not, it's too much for me. Like I like quick stuff. Um, so knowing that, I was like, okay, if I focus on bags, then I can kind of branch out to accessories, and then I can kind of branch out to home decor and like go from there. And I focus a lot on not only my brand name Bags by Bento, but also myself as Taylor Bento, the crochet designer. So with those two things combined, I think people know me as a person a lot more than they know like my business, if that makes sense. So some of my most successful designs haven't been bags. I mean, the hanging baskets, the doormat, um, and then my bag designs, like they speak for themselves. So I think having that kind of focus and then branching out can be a positive thing.
Well, tell me about your YouTube channel. Why did you decide to start YouTube channel and what's your vision for it?
I found my first big success on Pinterest. I had my first viral video on there in 2021, and it was a super simple short video about how to do a magic knot to connect your yarn. And it was funny because I had a lot of knitters saying like, no, you should never have knots in your project. And then all these crocheters that are saying, oh, great, thanks. I was looking for a quick fix. It was really funny. I enjoyed watching it all unfold. But um, a lot of people were asking, do you have a YouTube channel? Can you like do this on YouTube, have a longer video? And so I knew that people were kind of asking for that. And on Instagram as well, they're like, oh, we love your quick tutorials, but can you do a longer one? Or can you do a video tutorial for that bag pattern? And it was pretty overwhelming, honestly, because, I'm good at short form video, but I hadn't ever tried filming a 50-minute, full crochet tutorial. So that felt like a lot to me. So it took me a while to get up the confidence to try it. But last year, yeah, it's just been a year. That's crazy. So last year, I decided to finally just give it a try. So my first ever tutorial on YouTube was for my market bag, which is a simple pattern. And I just focused on doing it my way and not necessarily trying to make it like all the other crochet designers out there, and just like doing what I felt comfortable with. So, and there's positives and negatives to it. Like I'm sure all my videos have like their pros and cons, but I generally try to make my YouTube videos short and to the point. And I focus on making my video tutorials accessible for all different skill levels. And so my vision for my crochet YouTube is for people to be able to find tutorials that also have patterns so they can learn to read patterns while they're doing a tutorial if they'd like to do that, or they can just watch the tutorial on its own. So there's full tutorials for bags and baskets and doormats and things like that. And then there's stitch tutorials and short things too. So I try to mix it up.
Well, I mean, you sell patterns, right? And then you're doing tutorials that show everything. Like, do people have to buy the pattern in order to follow your tutorial? Or do you, like, why would you give it for free if you could sell that pattern, right?
Yeah, that's a great point. So I have learned that having different levels to things, it pays off in the long run. It's kind of like a sales funnel, so to speak. So I have a lot of my patterns, not all of them. Some of them don't have a video tutorial that's free. It's just a paid pattern. So it depends on what the pattern is. The more involved ones that take a lot of work and labor, I tend to not do free video tutorials for those. They just have a video tutorial that comes with the pattern when you pay for it. But for example, my hanging baskets, I have a free tutorial, a free pattern on my blog, and then a paid PDF pattern that's ad free that you can print out. And so people have different options. If you don't read patterns at all, you can follow the video tutorial. I get money from YouTube ads for that. If you want the free pattern with ads on it and you don't need to print it, you can read it on my blog and I get paid for the ads on my blog. Or you can buy the PDF pattern with no ads and I get paid for the PDF. So every way I still get paid. That makes sense. But it's just different ways for people to access what my patterns and what I have to offer.
I mean, I hear a lot of things, right? I'm hearing Pinterest, I'm hearing blog, YouTube channel, 7 times a week posting on Instagram and TikTok and everything. Describe me your day.
So I actually did a post about this on Instagram one time. It was like my standard daily schedule or whatever. And it was so funny because it's why are people interested in this? But I think people do have questions about how do you accomplish all of this. One of my favorite project management tools to keep track of everything is Trello, and it's free to use. And that's basically how I remind myself of things that need to happen. Whether it be like once a month or once a quarter, whatever it is. So I put all of my tasks in there, and my kids go to preschool in the morning. So that's my like time to be productive. And typically I'll start out on my computer, answering emails, doing any admin stuff that needs to be done. Then I have crochet design time scheduled out. And then I have time for my social media scheduled out. And I try to balance everything as much as I can. But there are times when it gets chaotic, and I'm just like, like this isn't going great. Generally speaking, for social media, my strategy has always been to focus on one main one at a time, and everywhere else gets reposts of that main one. So for a while it was Pinterest. Everything from my Pinterest just got reposted to Instagram. And then for a while, it's been Instagram, and everything from Instagram gets reposted to TikTok and Pinterest and YouTube Shorts. So I do try to find ways to make it more efficient and less work for me. And there are little hacks that I love that work great for me. Like I have a bank of all of my captions, and I reuse captions all the time. My hashtags are all there, so I don't have to constantly like think about hashtags or I just have them all there, all ready to go. So I share a lot of those types of tips on my Instagram subscription that I do for crochet business owners. And I do like tutorials for how to do reels and how to find shipping supplies that are affordable and all kinds of random stuff like that. But we talk a lot about how to save time and schedule out your day.
Well, you only been doing this as a business for a couple of years. Do you have a vision, like 10-year plan? Like, where do you see this business going?
Yeah, that's it. When I started, I was like, oh, it'd just be great to sell enough bags to have a part-time income. That was kind of my thinking there. I opened an Etsy shop, and I just like started selling bags locally. And it was pretty quickly that I realized, wait a minute, I'm really good at the social media, which makes sense because that's what I enjoyed doing in my last job. I kind of want to find ways to lean into that and branch out. Maybe it's not just bags, and kind of open up my mind to like there's more. Which is also has to do with your confidence. I think the more you allow yourself to experiment and try new things, the more you can gain confidence in finding out the things that you're really good at. So I started just having fun on social media and seeing what happened. And eventually, I realized that I could also make money doing that. So I also do social media consulting. And I think my biggest vision for all of this is that I will have like various streams of income from different things and not just one thing. And Bags by Bento will be known as a place to find like great bags and accessories patterns. And maybe I'll have a book published, I don't know, in the next 10 years. That would be cool. Um, I love like teaching, so I would love to do a class for people that helps them learn pattern reading or learn crochet or learn to do crochet business marketing. So I've got some ideas for some classes that I could maybe do online, but yeah, I'm open. That's one thing about me that I've always thought was a pro and a con, is that I'm pretty spontaneous and in the moment. I don't plan too far out in advance, but it helps me be flexible. So if something's not working, I am the type to just be like, well, tried it, didn't work, moving on, find the next thing. And I think that's also allowed me to become successful where I am now, because I don't spend too much time trying to make something work that's not working.
Well, how do you deal with negativity? Like whether it's being a mean comment or people telling you you're doing things wrong or people, I don't know, criticizing the bag that they bought.
Yeah.
How do you shake it off?
Yeah, it's tough. I won't sugarcoat it. It doesn't feel good initially. It really hurts. And I actually shared about this a couple days ago. with some of my crochet friends. I got a bad review on something, and those always suck. I mean, everybody gets them at some point, but when you get one, you're like, oh man, we're artists. So we take things personally because we put so much of ourselves into our designs and what we create. And it can be challenging to let it go. One thing I've learned about myself is that if I read the comment or the review or whatever it is, and just take a step away and let myself process it, let it all sink in. Don't read it over and over and over again and ruminate on it. And then come back to it later and see if there's actually some valuable feedback there that I could use that might benefit me and benefit my business. That works really well for me. I've had times when I've had to reach out to a fellow crochet designer or a crochet business owner and be like, this happened. Has this ever happened to you? Like, what do you say when this happens? And having those people is invaluable. I highly recommend that if you are in the crochet community to take advantage of that. Have that friend that you talk to about things, because it makes a huge difference to hear that you're not the only person that's experienced it.
What's crochet for you? Is it art or craft? And talk to me about your pricing ideas. How do you put price on something that takes you like endless hours, those times thinking about it, all those times trying and then remaking it? How do you deal with the pricing?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think I don't have a problem with the word craft or crafting, but I think in general people think of crafting as a hobby, and there's nothing wrong with being a hobby crocheter. That's a beautiful thing. I was a hobby knitter and crocheter for a very long time, but to be taken more seriously as a business owner, as a creator, as someone who creates patterns that shouldn't be stolen or copied. I think using words like artist, designer, that kind of helps overall for people to see me as more of a professional. Nothing wrong with crafting or calling myself a crafter. I'm also a crafter. I do a lot of crafting. But I think using different language to describe yourself isn't a bad thing. I mean, you can use all kinds of different words to describe who you are. And finding out what words work best for you, not only for how you like to describe yourself, but also for search. I know a lot of people don't think about it that way, but for search engine optimization on social media and Google, if you find a word that describes you that you like, that feels good to you, use it over and over and over again, because that's what you're going to be known for. As far as pricing, that one is a question I get all of the time. I would love to do like a workshop or something about it. But what I did whenever I was making physical items that I sold was a spreadsheet. And I believe I got the spreadsheet from Paper and Spark on Instagram. And she is great. She's a finance guru. She teaches crafters and business owners how to manage the financial aspect of their handmade business. So she helped me a lot. There was some great stuff in there, but also my finance background came in handy too. So I had a spreadsheet where I would keep track of my time, the materials cost, and I always had a little bit of profit on the top that I wanted to make sure that I always make a profit on something. I think people make the mistake of underpricing their items and they don't make a profit. And they're like, man, I've been selling all this stuff, but I'm not making, like, I still don't have a lot of money. What's happening? And it's because there's not enough of a profit margin there. And you are selling, but you're not retaining any of that money. So I've always thought through materials. Okay, what materials are going to give me the best chance of making a better profit? So why I experimented with different alternative materials like jute. Jute's really inexpensive. It's also good for the environment. I could buy it in bulk. And so I made a lot of bags with jute in the beginning because I could spend 4 or 5 hours making the bag and still sell it for less than $100 and make a profit. So thinking through those different aspects of it are really important. I think if you love making blankets and you know that blankets take time, and then you find ways, okay, what materials can I use that are going to help the price not be astronomically expensive? How do I keep track of my time in a way where I can be more efficient and I can lower that time so I can actually make a profit here? And then also recognizing that some products just aren't going to be easy to sell as others. So if you are, say, for example, a blanket designer, and you know, like you're only going to sell a $300 blanket maybe once or twice a year, because people do buy them, it just might take a little longer to find that customer. Then you also have stuff that's in a lower price range too. So you have something for every price bracket. So I try to think of it as like your $20 and under, your middle of the road items, and then your high ticket items. And that works really well for me.
Do you miss the time when you were just knitting or crocheting for not for money, just for yourself, for your pleasure?
Yes and no. I really try to set aside time just for me to have fun. And that's been really important to me to not lose my love for fiber arts. So when crochet starts to feel like a little bit draining or like I'm just not enjoying it as much, then I take some time to knit or macrame or paint or whatever I want to do to reinvigorate that creativity. So that's helped a lot with that. There are times when I feel really tired. I'm just like, man, it'd be nice to just like spend all my time making a cardigan for no reason, you know? But for the most part, I really enjoy what I do. And I think that makes a big difference. If you enjoy what you're doing, you don't start to lose that magic of like I'm still getting to crochet all the time and I'm creating things that I like. So I think that makes a big difference too.
Do you feel like you're living a dream?
Yes and no. I've got a lot of family stuff going on. So having this thing that's for me that I am so passionate about and really enjoy, that part of it feels like a dream. And I'm so glad that I have it. But then balancing that with like everyday life and family and all these stressful things that are happening in the world, you know, it can kind of feel strange sometimes. I'm like, oh, like this wonderful thing that I have so much fun doing is going so well for me, but then also I've got all these other things too that are on my mind. So I'm always constantly trying to balance it.
Well, what's Instagram or like social media in general? What is it for you? Like, do you just use it as a marketing tool, or is it a source of inspiration, or is it a source like a connection to the world? Like, how do you see it?
Yeah. So like I said, I started Bags of Bento and during the pandemic, so I wasn't seeing a lot of people. And I think a lot of people were feeling pretty lonely, including myself. And I use social media as a way to connect with people. And that means a lot to me because I am an introverted person. I also have two little kids, so I'm very busy, and it's hard sometimes for me to get together with friends, especially the ones that live far away. So having that daily connection with other crocheters and people who have similar interests to me, it really it means the world to me. It really does. And I don't think people realize that you can use social media as a way to grow friendships. There are people who I've met I met on Instagram and now we're friends in person. And I think that's where the crochet friends type of content that I created came from because I just really enjoy getting to know people. The people who test for me, the people I work with or have tested for, we've all really gotten to know each other. And that brings a lot of joy to my life, just being able to have friends that I can talk to on a daily basis about crochet and business and all the things.
Well, let's talk about testing because at some point I saw your post talking about that was your gateway into designing, basically. Like you were testing for other people and getting sort of a feel for how they write their patterns and their styles, and that was giving you ideas of how you can write yours. What's your ideal tester? How do you choose testers? How do you find testers?
Yeah. So I was testing at a time when social media wasn't quite as important in the testing world. So I didn't have like a crochet Instagram. I was just testing for people, mostly from like Facebook groups. Those are really big right now for crochet designers to find testers. Um, and I think now crochet designers are utilizing other platforms a lot more, like Instagram and TikTok. And so they're finding their testers from those platforms. Um, and so having a social media presence, having a little bit of savviness with video and photography can go a long way in getting chosen as a tester. It's not necessarily a must, but it can help a lot. And I think that's where people get a little frustrated because they're applying for tests and maybe not getting the opportunities because they don't have a crochet page or some way to show their crochet work. Because also, crochet designers are looking for someone who is going to be able to do the pattern without a lot of assistance. So if the pattern is like my backpack pattern is an intermediate pattern, so I needed testers who I knew had the skills to be able to get through that pattern without a lot of extra assistance. And so I'm looking on their crochet pages at what kind of projects they've done to kind of make sure, okay, yeah, like they would be good for this test. Because it can be really frustrating for the tester and the designer if they don't have the required skills for that test and you're trying to explain things and you're going back and forth with videos and you're like, it can get laborious. So that's one of the things I look for is to just double check like they actually have the skills for that particular pattern. That comes along with some of that education I've been sharing recently about your crochet skill level and choosing the right patterns for you. But also I look for people who are maybe aspiring crochet business owners or designers that I can work with that are really passionate about it, because those people tend to want to be part of the community. And if they can help me and I can help them and we can support each other. And it's a lot more of a mutual relationship versus someone who is not on social media at all, isn't as familiar with like marketing and stuff. It can get harder for us to both like mutually gain something from that. So I think that's what a lot of designers are looking for in their mind is like, oh, is this person like really excited to be a tester? Does this person really enjoy the process? Because if you work with someone like that, they're giving feedback, they're providing photos, they're, with you right along in the process. And that's a lot more fun.
Do you like working with the same testers, like proven and tried, or do you like to get new people to test your product?
Yeah, a bit of both. I haven't been doing this for a super long time, obviously. So at first, I was doing tester calls for every pattern because I needed to create a pool of crochet testers and figure out who I worked well with. So I was doing open tester calls regularly on Instagram. And I would do like a Google form where people would apply, and then I would choose people out of that. And that worked really well for a while. But then I got to a point where I was getting so many applications that it was getting really overwhelming and just a lot of work to get through all of those applications, because I never want people to feel like they're applying for something I'm not even looking at their application. So it means a lot to me that people even apply for stuff. So I do actually look at all those applications and add people on Instagram and try to like connect with them. But at this point now I do a mixture of both. I have people who I know I work well with and I reach out to them to see if anyone wants to do the test. If none of them are available, then I go to an open tester call.
Well, when you do designs, like, is it also scheduled? Do you have like, I'm gonna post that many designs per month kind of plan, and who is gonna test when? Is it like all very rigid schedule, or is it like, oh, I got this idea and that's gonna
Yeah.
be happening like 3 ideas a month and nothing next month? How do you work?
Yeah. It's a bit of both, honestly. I am working on being more scheduled and organized because I am so spontaneous. So I work with a tech editor, and she is very scheduled. And so the goal that we came up with when I started working with her is that I would shoot for 3 patterns a month. Um, and one of those patterns is already a pattern that I wrote that we're updating. So she's going in and like tech editing existing patterns too. So it's 2 new patterns and 1 updated pattern. And we manage that through Trello as well. So she's on there and I can say, oh, this one's ready for tech editing, or, oh, I looked at your edits. Like now it's ready to be looked at again. And that helps a lot for me to keep everything straight. I kind of have a pool where I have my ideas, and I'll take those ideas and be like, oh, like I really want this to come out in this month, and kind of put them in those spots. But I don't have the whole year planned out. I kind of give myself that flexibility. I've got the next couple of months figured out, but I kind of do it like in a 2 to 3 month like planning versus like the whole year, because things change. I get ideas that are like, oh, this is a great summer idea that I'm not going to like schedule for next summer. I don't plan that far in advance ever. But I know a lot of people who it works well for them to plan the whole year. And if that's good for you, great. But I get overwhelmed thinking about what's going to happen next week. So
Tell me about your partner, how he sees you, because you went from like corporate job to what he was considering a hobby of yours at some point and turned it into a new career. Do you run all your ideas by him? Is he like slowly backing away from you every time you start talking crochet? Like what's his role in that?
yeah, so my partner is an electrician and he is very practical when it comes to money and things. And so when I first started saying, "Oh, I'm going to sell some of my crochet stuff," he was like, "Okay, well, like make your money back for all this money you're spending on yarn, you know." Um, but he also was like, "But also apply for jobs." I was also applying for new jobs for a long time. This was during the pandemic. I had two kids under 2, and one of my kids has special needs. So I was like, okay, I'm applying for jobs, but I don't know like if I'm gonna find something that works for us. Like this is a lot. So he's like, okay, well, just like keep your eye open for things. And then I started like really investing time into my crochet business and was, seeing some traction. I'm like, oh, this is going pretty well. It's like, I think I'm just gonna I'm gonna focus on this and like really give it a try and stop applying for jobs for a while. And he was nervous. He was like, oh, are you sure? Do you think you can actually make money? Like he just was not totally sure this was going to become a thing. He thought maybe like I'd make a little extra money. But whenever, I think the biggest thing was whenever we went to do our taxes and I had all my stuff about my income for the year, he was like, what? It's like, wow, you actually make money. I'm like, yeah, I've been paying the mortgage, babe. So it's pretty fun actually to show him like how much I can do with all of this. And it's been fun, especially more recently, talking about the possibilities. He loves to talk about the future. So he's a good one that I talk to about like ideas and goals and things like that.
Do you plan to teach your children how to crochet?
I have a couple of videos of me crocheting with my kids, and they love to work with mommy. So they sit in my lap, and I'll take their hand and kind of guide them or whatever. My daughter's almost 4, and my son's 5. My son is 5, so they're very interested in what I'm doing, and they love to sit with me and wind yarn. Or my daughter loves the knitting machine. Um, so I think they will. I think they'll probably like enjoy at least being some part of it.
Well, when you're talking about knitting machine, right? Like in today's age, when people can go to Target and buy themselves a hat for $20 or less, why do you think it's important to keep the fiber arts alive?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think there is so much value in creativity, and you can find things in the maker community that you wouldn't find anywhere else. Unique and beautiful items that are made by somebody's hands are always going to be a lot more special than a $10 hat from Target. So I think I always try to think through how I can create items that are both unique and special and have that like handmade goodness to it, but also are going to be able to compete in the market to a certain degree. I don't try to compete with Target. I try to be competitive with items similar to mine in the Etsy space, in the like market, like spring markets and stuff I like to go to locally and kind of see what things are going for. Um, so yeah, you always want to be competitive, but you also don't want to try to compete with someone that's like a giant. That's why I love the crochet community and encourage us all to come together. Because if we're helping each other, then we can create something that could be better than the Targets and the Walmarts and all that stuff.
Well, I mean, over COVID, over this period of time when we were all stuck home, knitting and crocheting just exploded, basically. Everybody suddenly remembered how their grandma taught them how to do it, and everybody started doing it. Do you feel like there is space for everybody out there, like in the YouTube world and the Instagram, in the handmade market? Do you feel like there is space for anybody who wants to sell their things and show themselves?
Yeah, I do. And I am a big believer that there's more than enough for everyone to go around. And the reason I think that is because everybody is unique and different in their own way. So if you're not just trying to copy someone else, if you're being yourself and you're offering something that only you could offer to the world, then that's valuable. And I think people sometimes feel overwhelmed by the amount of competition. I've heard a lot of crocheters say, I wanted to start an Etsy shop, but there's just so many crocheters on there. Is it even worth it? And at that point, I think it's important to think about what your goals are. If your goal is to do something that's satisfying to you, that makes you feel happy, that maybe makes some extra cash, and if you're willing to kind of experiment and figure out what works best for you, then yeah, absolutely go for it. But if you're hoping to make a quick buck and that like people are just going to buy stuff and you're just going to post and they're going to sell, a lot of people are really disappointed because it takes a lot more work than that. It's creating a business is a lot of putting yourself out there, and it's a lot of taking opportunities as they come and looking for your own opportunities too. Because when you first start sharing things on Etsy, Etsy's not going to just like push your stuff out to people. You have to bring your own traffic. You have to kind of like build yourself up before people actually take you seriously. You have to make a few sales before the snowball starts rolling down the hill, you know? And so I approached it as I am going to invest in myself and invest in my business, and that will pay off later down the road. And it totally has. So I invested a lot of time in social media, in doing interviews and having people interview on my blog and getting myself out there in different corners of the internet because my business is based online. For other people, it might be getting involved in local markets, or maybe you partner up with the local boutique and you sell your items there. I think it's different for different people, but I think it's important that you recognize that it's going to take some investment. You can't just start something and like post it and
Expect to
ghost it.
go viral immediately.
Yeah, yeah. Took a lot of work.
Yeah. Well, I want to thank you for being my guest today, Taylor. I think I learned a lot from you, and I hope my viewers are going to learn a lot as well. And I'm going to put all the information of how they can find you online in the description of this video. So if you guys like this video, please find Taylor and subscribe to her channel and subscribe and follow her on Instagram and other social media platforms. Thank you so very much for being my guest today.
Thank you, Irina. I really enjoyed it.